So good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, Designing Out Waste. So just by means of introduction, my name is Peter Holland. I'm the founding director of Linear Structure, and I'm helping companies in the sector to improve their productivity and performance. And in a moment, I'd just like to introduce you to our expert panel for our discussion. But just by means of introduction of the subject, I think for most people, we recognize that we can't continue as a throwaway society. The idea of waste reduction and minimization is really imperative. But of course, the question along with that goes, yeah, but does zero to landfill really mean zero waste? So let me introduce you to our panel today. I'm delighted to be joined by Claire Williams. Good afternoon, Claire. Claire's the Group Creative Director for Ocee Design. I'm also joined by Joanna Knight, who is the Sustainability Manager at Women in Office Design and the Chairman for the Furniture Makers Sustainability Change and Sustainability Committee. That must be a very long business card. Finally, also, Richard Naylor, welcome from Hypnos, and Richard is the Group's Sustainable Development Director at Hypnos Beds. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for our conversation today. Looking forward to it. So maybe Joe, I could come to you first of all, because I know you educated me on a subject recently, and that is to do with this idea of looking at waste reduction and where does the waste go. So when people talk about this idea of, zero to landfill, does that actually mean zero waste?
Well, the short answer is no. So there we are, we'll move on. No, the bottom line is that landfill is now heavily taxed. And so it's actually really expensive. And so generally speaking, most waste, some is recycled, but remarkably low levels. The majority goes to incineration. Many people think, well, incineration, we're generating energy from that. Yeah, okay, in principle, but it's arguably and is one of the most inefficient way of generating energy. So the reality is, and of course it does emit carbon amongst other various nasties when you burn things. So it's not the solution, it's reducing waste that really has to be a focus.
Yeah, excellent. And I think really the purpose of these webinars and the series of webinars for the furniture makers is really to kind of inject some fresh thinking, some practical insights from people who are in the sector, in the industry, and looking at what the industry can do to improve. So as we go through this discussion, hopefully we'll share some of those insights and some practical points that you can take away and actually use in your own business to improve it. So the first theme that we were going to discuss was looking at the idea of maybe kind of backing up the bus a bit to a point where we're starting to think about a new design and thinking about the design issues to reduce waste. What do you think individuals and companies should be thinking about when they start their design process?
I'll jump in if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, go.
So I was a bit of prep for today, but if anybody listening is interested in circular economy and circular waste issues, then I think a good forum is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So to have a look at that. So there's some really good information on what is good practice, what is bad practice. But I was looking at some data from that website about sort of the impact of products, and 80% of a product's environmental impact comes at the design stage, not in the use stage, but at the beginning. So there's an opportunity for any manufacturer through just simple things like material selection in itself to get things right in a first principle scenario. And then it's about how we look at creating what we call in our worlds functional products, because ultimately, if I design a mattress, it needs to be functional, it needs to be comfortable, and someone needs to be able to visually appreciate that product and sleep on it and get the benefits from it. If I design a product that is very modular and can be easily taken apart, so on and so forth, but it's not comfortable, then it fails in its primary function. So I think, you know, looking at all of these things, we have to sort of look at what our primary function is, but how do we do that better? And I'm not sure what the other guys think to that, but that's a sort of starting point where we are on a sort of evolved journey as a bed manufacturer. But I would say it's not perfect, but the world of continual improvement and things like that, certainly in material selection, is playing a big part in how we consider design within a sleep product.
Great, thanks, Richard.
I think you're spot on there, but equally, I think it's not just material selection, it's the whole construction of the product, isn't it, to maximize its life cycle.
Yeah.
So how can you, you know, it may become needing renovation, may need to be repaired.
Yeah.
Has it been designed in such a way to actually facilitate that? I know you've done a lot of work in that field, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, we've done quite a lot to look at. So we're already starting in our design process. At the beginning of the process, we're addressing certain issues like how easy is it at the end of its life for a product to be disassembled into its component parts for simple recycling? How can we reduce the amount of raw materials we're using in a product? So are there things that historically have always been done but actually don't need to be done? Are there elements in the design and manufacture process that we can remove that will mean we use less material? And I think, as Richard alluded to, really addressing that whole material value thing. So the decisions we make on the materials we select, it has become much more important from the outset. You know, when a product is just a concept drawing, that's part of the design process moving forward. But for us, we're moving more towards where can we reduce the amount of materials we're using. I think that's the priority for us.
I was reading another article about timeless design as well. So designing for longevity, but designs that have a timeless aesthetic last longer because it's appreciated for longer. And dare I say, I'm not in the office furniture world, so if it's a swear word and I say like an Eames chair, you know, that type of product has a classic design function to it, and you know, will always have a pleasing aesthetic. Whereas you know, a bit like fashion and shoulder pads and things like that, they go in and out. We want to change because it's not fashionable anymore, when actually the product's still functional. It's still an item of clothing or a chair, but it's no longer required because simply the look is not right. So I think there's an element of working on timeless designs as well, and seeing how we can reinvent that sort of area as well as longevity. And then one of the other things that I read about how our business models can change as well, as when you design to last, Joe, it's equally can be a more expensive product, but does that open it up to a rental market scenario as well, so that it you know, the overall cost while you're in use is still the same as what you would have had if you bought a lesser item, but that product can move on and be used elsewhere at some point, having been refurbished.
It's something I've been shouting about for a while now, and it's been quite interesting that some, certainly in the domestic furniture market, they are starting to look at rental models. But it's very, to be fair to manufacturers, it's very difficult to make it work from an economic point of view.
Sure.
Because of all the reverse logistics to get the product back and then put it back into the manufacturing cycle again. But equally, my argument in the contract furniture sector is, you know, we rent our offices. Very few people own them. Why do we have to own the furniture? And I know the argument, and as of somebody who's been in the furniture industry for way too long, I know the arguments is that, you know, you personalize your office to meet your particular brand style, your company's needs, etc. But I do think that that will be the future, and potentially will reduce waste if those products can go back to the original supplier and or manufacturer, so that then there is the process to reuse and purchase as a second-hand value. Whereas at the moment, most office furniture has minimal second-hand value. And I hear your point about designing for longevity, but you could probably list on one hand the number of products that are considered vintage purchases, such as the Eames chair.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just in a world of overconsumption. So, you know, living within our means is the phrase, isn't it? And all these planetary boundaries. And I think I was reading a statistic from, I think it's the American Chemical Society. So we talk about all the recycled materials that we have the opportunity to use, and which we're happily talking about today. But the production of virgin plastic will double between now and 2050, it's predicted. And I just, it's a crazy statistic, given that we have so much resource already sort of taken out of the ground in terms of petrochemical products, that we can't do better than that as a global society. And that's a shame. And I think it's just about how we think about things as individuals and how we value things as individuals. And business, you know, clearly has an influential part to play in that. I mean, I get particularly frustrated with the bed industry because they have a phenomenon of doing 100-night free trials on products, you know, on a mattress. So you can buy a product, sleep on it for 50 nights or so, don't like it, I'm going to return it. Well, what happens to that product? You know, so those guys have evolved into having a second-hand market, maybe a disposed market if it's been soiled or what have you. But, you know, why is that necessary? It never has been necessary, and it's a nice thing to do, but that now encourages one delivery product to deliver the mattress in the first place, one to collect it back, one to replace it and send it back again. And that's just the delivery model, let alone materials employed to make another mattress to send to them, and so on and so forth. So things like that could be better, you know, asking our customers to try the product and make sure they're happy with it and try it so it's not wasteful would be, you know, the right conclusion for me. But I know we're having sort of in-depth discussions about that within my sector, because I just find it extraordinary, that principle. And apologies to any manufacturers that do that.
No, I think this is the difficulty. There's always this sort of pulling backwards and forwards between commercial reality and how do you facilitate that whilst also recognizing the potential for waste. I mean, it's the same way as people have turned to me and said, you know, you've been working in the furniture industry, it's fed and watered you for X number of years, you know, surely aren't you saying that we should make less furniture? Potentially, yes, but I do think manufacturers and suppliers have other revenue opportunities. But we just have to think differently, away from this very linear model that we've been used to.
Yeah.
One area that's quite interesting when I spoke to you before, Claire, was about this idea that sure, you have some products which retain value and will be kept for generations. Fine, I get that. But like you said, Joe, that's not every situation. There's a very big middle ground where that doesn't happen. And you were just mentioning to me, Claire, a little bit about what you've been doing in terms of multifunctionality. Do you want to talk a little bit about collections and how that works?
Yeah, I think, you know, this whole rise in the last 25 years of this concept of activity-based working. So you work in an area, in an environment that suits the activity you're trying to carry out, has really encouraged the growth of product that works for multiple uses. And this has really stemmed for us out of our organisation over in Scandinavia, because they work very much on what has to them the biggest impact on the environment in terms of built spaces are the office spaces we use and how much per square metre an office space drains on our environment. So actually, wouldn't it be better if we had product that was multifunctional, easily broke down, could be stored away simply, so that actually you could use one piece of furniture to do lots of different things. And we see that a lot in higher education now. You know, you only have to go to some of the most effective university campuses now, and instead of lots and lots of lecture halls and very dedicated spaces with fixed furniture, they are embracing the ability to have active learning. So flip top tables that easily store away, chairs that have little writing tablets on rather than lots of tables, and can have multi-functioning uses. And I think this whole change in the way education is delivered, the change in the way people go into work and get their job done, means that flexible furniture is more relevant. And so it means that one piece of furniture, in theory, can deliver lots of different outcomes. And that's very much, I mean, we're a manufacturer, we don't sell desking. There's lots of elements of the workplace environment we don't explore. And it just so happens that the products we do produce and design suit flexible environments, and in turn, hopefully, should mean one thing does more than say a table and a chair. So I think there's something to be said for that, but I think that goes hand in hand with the changing nature of work and the fact that, you know, 1-to-1 desk ratios are in the minority now. And even more so, people aren't going into work 5 days a week, into the office 5 days a week anymore. So when they are coming together, they're looking at product that can facilitate everything from heads down working to working in a group in a collaborative way. So in that way, there has been a big change. And I think people now will spend more money on a single item, for example, a flexible booth, than they probably would have done 5 or 10 years ago. That would have been quite a big spend. People are much more likely to do that now because it supports different ways of working. So I think that has its part to play too.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea, that kind of creation of collections and multi-functional usage. Richard, am I right in thinking that you mentioned modularity in beds, and I don't think I was really very familiar with that. Is there anything that you're working on in that area?
Yeah, certainly on our contract side of the business, so supplying into hospitality, we have been exploring modular design, in that you can take a mattress, typically has a hygiene issue or something on the surface layer, but the engine of that product, the spring unit and the bit, often isn't damaged. So the way that we can take one part away and replace it with another part in a typical hospitality environment is about extending the life of that product. So a mattress can last double its lifespan if we employ that technique, and it's less expensive for the hospitality owner as well. So it covers a number of bases. So it encourages less waste. We still have to take something back, but again, it's much smaller, and the way that we construct those products using monomaterials, we've moved away from using blends and things like that, or non-compatible blends. When you look at fillings and fibers that you can employ within a mattress, for example, things like polyester and cotton were quite common in this industry over the last 2 or 3 decades, but absolute no-no now. Well, you can, but it's very hard to recover those individual materials at end of life. It's almost impossible. And of course, you know, the recycler, who is essentially in the nicest possible way a scrap merchant, just does not have the time and resource to pull apart fibers. And it's the same with fabrics and materials. So your warp's made from cotton and your weft's made from polyester, and vice versa. Not great. If it's a monomaterial, then it can easily be recovered and put into a single and transparent supply chain for reuse one way or another. So we employ modular on that basis, and then how we put those products apart or how we take them apart is then given, you know, absolute focus from our technical teams, and we continue that journey. It's evolving. But we never assume things are perfect, otherwise we'll be complacent, won't we? So, yeah.
I think that point you made about materials is highly relevant, because I so often see the words 100% recyclable.
Yeah.
And yet who, where, how?
Yeah.
Are so relevant, because if it's going to cost so much money to be able to recycle it, it won't happen. Alternatively, there's only one recycler in the country that can do it, or indeed
I think it's Joe, I think you're absolutely right, and we shall call it out for what it is, which is greenwashing, because or naivety, whichever way. But
let's say that
you can argue that every material is recyclable per se, but it's got to be recovered in the first place. So if we put it into a load of quilting or stitching that is really hard to unpick and recover those materials, then it isn't recyclable. And when you look at a typical mattress recycler, they'll recover what's easiest and what has the most value. And, you know, in principle, and a lot of them are doing some good things in their own ways and finding other reuse. I'm not saying that they're working very hard at this, as we all, I hope. And but, you know, for me, it's about, you know, making that process really easy. So it's those materials are easy to recover. The bit I was going to talk about as well was blockchain technology and how you can sort of add a passport to your product through a QR code or something. So not only do you get traceability of your materials, whether it's wool, cotton, polyester, whatever format that comes in, but you can also give the person who's responsible for recycling that product at end of life a very quick glimpse as to what the ingredients of that product are and how you could approach the recycling it. So I think that all comes into the picture when we're looking at design these days as we go forwards.
Yeah, it's so important, really important, because apart from anything else in the commercial field, it's warranty information. It's original manufacturer to obtain spare components and so forth. So those issues are really important to removing waste, because then if you can extend the life of the product through, you know, the arm's broken or it needs reupholstery or whatever it might be, if you know who made it in the first place,
exactly,
and the production of the product, it makes all the difference.
And I think it is really useful if we have those sort of conversations with our value chain. You look at the end of life scenario and those guys, and you try and understand it from their perspective. And I think if I take the average mattress recycler, they're getting God knows how many mattresses back a day, but let's say there's 5,000 mattresses appearing, and each one of those mattresses is different size, different manufacturer, different construction, different materials. How on earth do I know what's in that product? And I've got 2 or 3 minutes to take it apart. So putting some kind of material passport so they can segregate the mattress at the beginning. So that's a foam line, that's a steel line, that's a natural line or whatever. They know how to sort of approach it, and approach it with a little bit more knowledge, I would say. But it requires, you know, a united front from manufacturers to do the same thing. It's a bit like, is it going to be Betamax or VHS? But we need to decide on a system that works.
Yeah, you guys kind of touched on our second thought there about issues that support the reuse of renovation and remanufacturing. We kind of already started on that. Are there any other areas that you think would be really important to consider?
I think the government policy in all of this, I think, tends to sway commercial minds. And if we illustrate the car industry, if you look at the government's 10-point plan for a green economy by 2030, they're going to, as we've all seen publicised, that, you know, the production of petrol and diesel cars will be banned as of 2030. No new versions. So guess what? The car industry has evolved and adopted, and we're all now being bombarded with electric and hybrid cars of various sorts. So that has worked because it's a forced issue. The challenge we have in our industry, all of us in our different sectors, is we have very forward-thinking companies, and we have those who are going about it every day. And I'm not saying that's a problem, but if it was a mandatory situation, then everybody has to evolve. I'm not sure that's a popular decision, but if you look at the recent sort of UN data on, you know, how far away we are from meeting the Paris 1.5 cap on climate change, we're just a million miles away from it, and I don't see how we're going to evolve anything, whether it's a waste or CO2 emissions, what have you, without any regulatory involvement at some point. Because
well, I think there will be regulation for waste in particular and reuse, because it has to be that. I mean, the example I give, it's such an easy one, isn't it? Is plastic carrier bags at supermarkets or shops in general. We all used to forget to take our bags with us because you knew you could get them at the supermarket.
Yeah, 100%.
You had to pay for them. Suddenly, people don't want them anymore, and they remember to bring their own. And that's so right. It just shows that regulation, unfortunately, is necessary in certain areas. I agree.
Yeah. I think we need a bit of stability within the political side of things to help get consistency, because from a business point of view, it's very challenging when the people in charge change quite frequently at the moment, and even a tenure of 5 years for a government when you're looking at climate issues is really quite short. Yeah.
In much of Europe, there is now an eco fee that's applied to new products, which is used to help fund the recycling and reuse of discarded products.
Yeah.
So I actually believe that that's a really straightforward way application. I do accept that it's, I'm sure I'm probably being a bit naive, but I think it is through this approach. And as I understand it, manufacturers do get some back, some of that feedback for initiatives that they're doing in terms of recycling. And so if other, France and so forth can do it, why can't we?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think our industry has done a pilot scheme with Zero Waste Scotland on a extended producer responsibility scheme, which has been sort of drafted with various stakeholders, from retailers to DEFRA to whoever, lots of the right people in the right room virtually to get this thing off the ground. And that's now sat on a desk somewhere in .gov, waiting to be reviewed by somebody to see whether this is a good idea or not. But look, it is essential. It is essential. I mean, my industry, mattresses are very bulky, and take forever to break down in any type of landfill situation. So they're not great. And the best thing for us to do is take them apart and recover all those materials hopefully on an endless cycle.
Well, as a product, they're inherently going to be waste, aren't they? Meaning that they won't be used any longer, because there's not a huge secondhand market for mattresses. So I guess there's a great imperative for you guys. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, people are finding ways to reuse them and clean them, sanitize them. But again, it's quite a niche market, because I think, most, the way that a mattress degrades typically is not necessarily through the function of the product, it's through the health of the product, because we shed skin cells, we sweat, there's bacteria, there's dust mites, there's all these types of things that can go on inside a mattress that isn't very nice, quite frankly. So being able to change your mattress quite frequently is quite a healthy thing to do. I would say that as a mattress manufacturer, but that was not an advert for our industry. But equally, making mattresses that have longevity is, certainly what my business Hypnos is about. So we make to last, and I think if you've seen the butterfly diagram from Ellen MacArthur, where you've got the concentric rings coming out, and it talks about different ways of looking at end of life and how to manage waste. And the one that's nearest to the middle is about longevity, and designing for ultimately recyclability is the least favored option, whilst it's still really good, but it also encourages fast fashion if you're not careful.
There's one area I think was quite interesting as well on this point of sort of renovation and remanufacturing. Claire, we were talking about this idea about, especially in contract furniture, how easy is it to dismantle at the end of life, and you were mentioning to me, trying to make changes so that it happens, and also trying to take out things that prevent it, a bit like the adhesives that we were talking about.
Yeah, I think we launched a new product this year where we've been doing lots of tests on not using glue, because as soon as you use glue, you can't recycle these pieces. So we've been looking at not using glue on some of our upholstery, and there's a bit of a push-pull that goes on, because you don't use glue, so you just create stitched covers. And there's a couple of reasons this is great, because if those covers start to wear and tear, rather than getting new furniture, they're really simple to get replacement covers, so the product lasts longer. And also that would feed into the whole leasing, renting furniture, because if what you've got doesn't work for one customer, after a while they can quite simply change it. The problem we have is, if you don't use glue, and I won't get too technical in the manufacturing process, but if you don't use glue, you will sometimes get this thing called pooling, which is when you've got the fabric tight across a foam seat, it will create these ripples because it's not glued on. Now you'll have designers and end users saying, we don't like that. It doesn't look neat. It doesn't look crisp. And so to get that crisp look, you have to apply glue. So there is this push-pull where it's better for the environment to stop using all these glues. Customers don't always like the look of no glue. And that's what it actually comes down to. And we can do all the right things, like we've taken away the fabric underneath an upholstered chair now in our new range, so that if you tip the chair over, you can see all the springs. It doesn't have that covering fabric underneath to hide the unsightly mechanism. But unless you're going to tip the piece up and look at it longingly, you're not going to see that mechanism anyway. And what it means is we need 1.5 to 2 meters less of fabric on one small unit. But again, we can do all these things, but when it comes down to it, if a customer says, well, we don't like the fact that it might do that after a year, so use glue, there is that conflict between what the look they want and what is a better manufacturing process in terms of for the environment. And also by not using glue and all these other things, we can easily break a piece down into its individual parts for simple recycling. But there is that push-pull between what people will tolerate in terms of look. And I go back to the point that Richard made about we need to be more conscious about having product that will last longer, as opposed to fads and trends. And, you know, I worked in the fashion industry for a long time, and at one point they were very behind in the way they approached us. They've come on in leaps and bounds now in terms of, you know, the people that are buying the majority of fashion, dare I say it, are younger people. And there was a time that these fast ship manufacturers were offering things very cheaply, and there's still many of them doing it, but you wore them twice, you threw them away. And a lot of the materials that we used in the manufacture of these clothes couldn't be recycled. And now there is a real move of hearts and minds that actually, is that the right thing to do? Should we be buying fast fashion just because it's cheap and we'll only wear it once? Shall we make a conscious decision to buy fashion that costs us more money, but we will keep on wearing it, keep on wearing it, keep on wearing it? And I can honestly say the rise in sustainable fashion brands has gone through the roof. And what's really interesting about these sustainable fashion brands is they are making money, they are profitable, their business is growing. So I think there is huge opportunity to be in the same position. But the shame of it is the industry we're in, dare I say it, isn't the most glamorous, exciting, you know, and so it's about getting people to really absorb and accept that we shouldn't just be going for fads and fashion. And I think the fact that the younger generation, who are now the designers, the specifiers, the architects, are much more aware of these sorts of things. So I think we will see things changing. I think we will see people's reason for buying and specifying product. It will change. I'm confident and optimistic that that will happen.
And I think people such as yourselves telling that story, it's about storytelling, isn't it? Explaining why it's so important, that so it's got a slight rippling effect. You know, is it really the end of the world? No, it's not. Well, it will be the end of the world if we just carry on the way we've been going without being too melodramatic. And so it is about storytelling and trying to galvanize everybody to really tell that message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, and the more, and you know what's really funny, the product we launched in May here at Clerkenwell Design Week, what was really interesting is it looks beautiful and it's got a really strong design story about it. But the thing that people were most interested in was when you flipped one of the units over and said, we've saved 2 meters per unit by not putting the cover fabric over the springs. It was just extraordinary. We had all these documents, you know, pointing out the finer points of the design process and all these other things. And when it actually came to it, people just want to have a tangible example of how it's doing some good. And if you can say we've used 2 meters less per seating unit, we've created units that have shared componentry. So on a 2-piece unit, instead of using 6 legs or whatever it is, 8 legs, we've only used 4. And that in real terms means we've saved this amount of money, we've reduced the amount of metal we're using, we've reduced the amount we're having to spray and powder coat. That's what people want. And in terms of who our customers are, you know, if you've got a furniture dealer talking to a client about, you can buy this product that uses this much fabric, this much does this, or you've got this product that uses 5 meters less, that uses X amount less metal in it. It's a really simple and easy way for the customer to make an informed decision. And I think sometimes the problem is we can sell it based on the science, and really the people who are making the decisions don't want to hear too much about the science. They want tangible examples of what they're making a better decision will mean in practical terms. That's my experience.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And Claire, do you think that they trust you to, they trust your brand, say, well, it's always from your company is going to be a good product, it's going to be functional, it's going to be long lasting, but I like these other credentials?
I think genuinely, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here representing Ocee International, but I think we are really honest. So what we've always said is we haven't got it all right. We make mistakes. This is part of a very long journey that we are a very small part of, and we're doing the best we can. But we're going to make mistakes. And I think the biggest turnaround for us moving forward and where we really also want to focus is a collaborative, collective response. That means we work with fabric manufacturers, we work with all the people we buy the materials from, we link up with them so that it's a shared message. And we've been doing a lot of that with some of the big fabric manufacturers, you know, Camira, Gabrielle, Svensson, where we're actually doing joint knowledge shares, and we're delivering content which shows that we are being mindful about who we work with, and they in turn are mindful about working with us. So that, you know, when we've got somebody that's deciding to use our product, they can see that it's not just us, but it's us working with other responsible manufacturers to create a completely holistic approach. So I know that's important to us as a manufacturer for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've when we look at how we filter products or materials coming into the business, really, you know, looking at those opportunities through an ESG lens and saying, how does this fit our purpose and our direction, and does this work for our business? It does narrow down the opportunities for us as manufacturers. But then I think equally, if our usual supply chains aren't up to the challenge, then we've got to, I like the phrase, kiss a few frogs, and hopefully there'll appear a prince or a princess somewhere along the line.
I've been trying for years, by the way.
But yeah, I think it's really challenging. I love hearing your story. It's great, and I think it's also, you know, dare I say, you've got to pioneer a bit to drag the industry along, because I think sometimes there's a commercial risk by not putting as much material in as your competitor, because somebody somewhere is going to value your product less because there isn't as much there. But somebody who is, you know, an A&D customer whose fingers on the pulse and looking to design environmentally friendly products or include environmentally friendly products into a design are going to look at yours so favorably. And we would hope that the market is evolving that way. I was reading, Peter, is a KPMG report. It's on there. If you Google KPMG and ESG lens on valuations of businesses, it was basically saying that your business valuation could be less if you're not dealing with ESG issues. So, okay, profit multipliers are one thing, but there's going to be an algorithm somewhere that says if you're not doing these things, then you're actually, you know, falling behind the market. And whilst you're profitable today, you'll possibly be extinct in the future. So it's incumbent on all of us here and everybody listening to sort of you know, put a lens on their own businesses if they're not, or work within, you know, parties like these and talking to the furniture makers about how can we be better. And I think that sharing forum and sharing common good practice is really, really important for all of us. You know, the car industry, I think Tesla didn't it with free patents on opened up his patents on all of these things to get the electric car market moving, and it certainly has worked.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the point is that, and it's always been the case with any risk management situation, as long as you recognize where you compete as manufacturers or suppliers, wherever it be in the commercial model, and you say, right, those subjects are ring fenced because we compete. There is great opportunity and development to be had through collaboration. And I think we all have a responsibility to work collaboratively because nobody's got a single answer. And so therefore, if we can all learn from each other and push the direction of travel, I mean, things like Claire was saying, we haven't just got to educate the buyers of the furniture, but Joe Public as well. So in your case, Richard, it's even more great because you've got Joe Public buying your products, but they need to understand those messages. And you know, people working in an office need to understand why if they lift a chair up, it hasn't got the fabric underneath it. So it's all of those stories, and then I think they will buy in because most people recognize that we can't carry on the way we're going.
And I think it has other benefits, your call it invention, Claire, because you can see the interior, you know, it's easy accessible as well. So if there is a problem, it can easily be accessed and rectified. Equally, there's something less to take apart at end of life. There's so many plus points for that, you know. Yeah, I don't know how much lighter it makes the product, but there's something there, isn't there, in terms of footprint for travel and stuff.
It much lighter, but yeah, I think you know, we're on the start of that journey, but it's definitely now what we want to do moving forward. You know, reduce the amount of raw materials we're using where we can, and being brutally honest too, by doing that, we can say that we are, I mean, I think the word innovation is overused, but we can say that we're in our own way, within our own organisation, pushing to be more innovative. And I think for us, that's quite important. Yeah, so it's definitely the way we're moving forward now, for sure.
Brilliant. Well, I think you've definitely covered the last section or topic that we want to look at, which is really customer demand and industry support, because you've talked about some really great insights there. And just, I think as a takeaway personally from listening to your discussion, this idea of communicating value of the changes that you're making to your customers is just critical, because I agree with you, Joe and Claire and Richard, that if people know the benefits, then I'm sure they will be able to make a better and more informed decision. So Joe, just thinking, I mean, sadly time's sort of run away with us now, but I was just thinking about for people who may be watching this and thinking, right, where could I get some more information? What would be sort of some next steps or events?
Well, back in earlier this year, I want to say summertime, it was that sort of time, the Furniture Makers Company formed its first Climate Change and Sustainability Committee, which you'll be pleased to hear I chair. And we wanted to make a positive change and positive difference, rather than so many committees, you know, tend to be a bit of a talking shop. So we have and will be holding an industry day on the 14th of December at Furniture Makers Hall. It's also organised in conjunction with the British the British Furniture Confederation. Apologies to the BFC, suddenly had a brain seizure there. And really, it's an opportunity for everybody to come along. We will be having a number of short presentations. They're 10 to 15 minute presentations to give a snapshot of subjects. And you can dip in, dip out, attend as long as you want to. But most importantly, it's about networking. It's about coming along, meeting people either from the same sector in which you're involved in, or, you know, so if you're in the contract market, yes, come along. But equally, you may learn, as you've probably done so today, some interesting facts from the domestic furniture sector or the bedding sector or the flooring sector, because of course the Furniture Makers Company covers the whole of the furnishing industry. So we'll also have a representative from Carpet Recycling UK there, for example. And it's really that opportunity to find out more and routes you can then take to develop your business to be more sustainable.
Right, thank you very much. Well, time's up for us today, but I just want to thank you, Richard, Claire and Joe for all of your contributions, some really interesting insights, and I appreciate you taking the time out from a busy schedule to be with us. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks then.
Bye-bye now.